Bedwars was once probably the most popular and recognizable minigame in all of Minecraft. However, in recent years, its popularity has wavered slightly compared to what it was during its peak. Don't get me wrong, it's still relatively popular. It can still get high player counts on servers like Hypixel to this day, but it's undeniably not as popular as it once was, especially on websites like YouTube. Where it once was a major attraction on the homepage in terms of Minecraft content, it now resides as a game struggling for any relevancy, and one which you don't really see anymore, and for the life of me I can't figure out why. Since its initial debut, the core gameplay has not changed that much from the original concept of trying to eliminate your competitors by breaking their beds whilst keeping your own bed intact. So in theory, the discussion around the game should not have changed that much either. But for some reason, that doesn't seem to be the case with Bedwars, unfortunately, as over the years it has become increasingly less and less relevant. Despite this decline in relevancy, however, recently I had the itch to dive back into the game and play it for the first time in close to a year, to see if it was as good as I remembered. As a result, just a bit before 2024 started, I played Bedwars again for the first time since my 100 games video on it, which you can find a link to in this video's description and in the card above, by the way, in an attempt to claim at least one win in a 4-player team match. Initially, I thought this wouldn't take me too long to achieve. After all, how difficult can it be to just get one win? However, as I soon discovered, it was going to take a lot longer than I expected. You see, I suffer from this very rare condition not a lot of people know about, known as a skill issue, which is very apparent when I play games like Bedwars. Although I've spent more hours on the game than I have socializing with other people, I'm still not exactly very good at it. As a result, although me getting just one win in Bedwars sounds easy on paper, in reality it's a bit more difficult considering how not good I am. Still, I was nonetheless determined, so I persisted on with my journey to victory. And now that it's all over, I'm going to attempt to document that journey in this video for everyone to see, as well as answer the question of whether Bedwars is still good 7 years later. But before we continue, let's establish some background information that's important for the remainder of this video. Firstly, I assume if you've clicked on this video, you probably already know what Bedwars is and how it works. But just in case you don't, for whatever reason, at which point I question why you're even here, I'll briefly explain it now. Bedwars is a team-based minigame where you and up to 4 teammates spawn on a series of floating islands above an endless, empty abyss, where you then must defend your team's designated bed, which allows you and your teammates to respawn after death, and prevent it from being destroyed by opposing players. Once a bed is destroyed, the members of your team can no longer respawn, and will be eliminated from the game if killed. The goal is to eliminate all opposing teams from a match by breaking their beds and killing their players, both of which can be made easier using the multitude of weapons and equipment that can be bought from in-game shops using the game's various currencies, which can be found scattered all around the map. Overall, it's a relatively simple gameplay loop, which I suppose is why it was so popular back in the day. That, and because the game is generally fun to play, even if you're like me and are less than stellar at playing it. Secondly, all of these games were played using the 1.8 combat mechanics, since those are the mechanics I feel more comfortable with, plus the performance of version 1.8 is better for recordings, most of the time. And finally, the last thing I would like to establish before we begin is the date these games took place. You might think this is a weird thing for me to specify, as it usually isn't important, but as I explain further, it may make a bit more sense. These games were all played between the 23rd and the 24th of December 2023, just before 2024 started and during the Christmas season, which resulted in one small impact on my gameplay. Though it was only an aesthetic change, as per Minecraft annual tradition, on the 24th the texture of the chests in the game were changed from their regular look to a festive retexture. Since chests are prominently featured on some of the islands in the Bedwars maps, this change was captured frequently in my footage, and I'd like to take this opportunity to point this out before the video starts to prevent any confusion. Alright, now that we have all of the boring background information established, let's get started and look at some of my actual Bedwars games. As you can imagine, I played quite a few of them in my quest to claim victory, and over the course of this video, I'm going to attempt to analyze and break down what happened in each of them leading up to my eventual win. As for the order in which I'm going to talk about each of these games, chronological order makes the most sense, as you would expect. Meaning the first game we're going to be taking a look at is, of course, the very first game that I played. The one that was my reintroduction back into Bedwars after a whole year of dormant activity. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. This game went pretty well, all things considered. Though it was by no means my best performance. Considering how I was still getting used to the flow of the game by this point, I'm amazed I was able to get this far into a match on my first try. Perhaps it was due to some repressed skill from a year ago coming back to me upon picking up the game again. Or maybe it was just a stroke of luck, but whatever it was certainly helped by the strong start I had to this game. For the first minute or so of the match, I decided to stay in my island's generator and collected as much currency as I could, which I then used to buy strong equipment that could help me break as many beds as possible, including iron armor, a stone sword, some wool, and a pair of nail clippers. Then, once all of these items had been bought, I left the island generator and started making my way to the central island in the middle of the map, where I'd have the ability to obtain yet another form of in-game currency, emeralds. For those who don't know, these are the rarest and arguably the most useful valuable in all of Bedwars, only found in the central island and in a fully upgraded Team Island generator. And they can be used to buy some of the best items in the entire game, including two particular items I wanted to use to help me break beds: invisibility and jump potions. These items would make it much easier for me to raid an opposing team's island, as their name would suggest, once drunken, they would give me both invisibility and jump boost effects respectively. However, getting the emeralds to buy these potions was going to be a lot more tedious than I expected, as whenever I attempted to go grab some, I would always seem to get distracted by other players around me in one way or another, which usually resulted in my death. For example, on my first trip, before I even managed to get to any of the emerald generators, I encountered not one, but two players already trying to invade my team's island. Not wanting them to succeed in breaking our bed, I decided to fight and kill them before they could get to it. Unfortunately, soon afterwards, when I was on low health after fighting both players, another player snuck up on me and was able to kill me as well. Then, when I tried going to the central island again upon respawning, the same thing happened. Eventually, I was able to get the emeralds I wanted, but not before getting distracted again for a third time by two yellow players making moves towards our island. Though, thankfully, this time I didn't die while fighting them. Regardless, now that I had the emeralds I needed, I was finally able to buy both an invisibility and jump potion, which I intended to put to good use as soon as possible. But first, I needed to decide which team's bed I was going to try and break. At this point, yellow was already out of the picture, as their bed had been destroyed minutes prior, which left only blue and green as potential targets. And although green seemed like a good pick, I eventually decided on attacking blue team's bed instead. The reason for this was simple. From my perspective, it appeared as though there was only one player on Blue's island when I went to observe it. So I, assuming that all the other players were away at that moment, thought it would be an easier target to go for as it would face less opposition. As a result, when I was ready, I drank both my potions and snuck onto their island undetected. When I got there, I wanted to kill the only blue player on the island first and foremost, to prevent them from getting in my way. Sure, it would blow my cover slightly, since afterwards they would know someone was on their island, but it wouldn't be too much of an issue, since I would hopefully be able to destroy their bed before they respawned. So, I went up to them while invisible, and killed them without much trouble. I then went to destroy the bed, and then suddenly the entirety of Blue Team, who had previously not been on the island, spawned into existence and started attacking me. As you can imagine, I was quite startled by this, and a little bewildered as well about where they all came from with such good timing. I attempted to fight them off so I could still try and break the bed, but it was no use. I was no match for 3 players at once, and I was forced to leave their island without breaking their bed. Thankfully, I was able to escape in one piece. But I was still disappointed by this failure. However, I wasn't going to give up that easily. So as soon as I was forced out of Blue's base, I immediately went back to the emerald generators and picked up some more emeralds, which I used to buy another set of potions. Though it might not have worked for me the first time I tried it, I planned to use my potion strategy again and again until it did, whether that be on Blue or Green's bed, as despite my previous setbacks, I still had the utmost confidence in it. Additionally, I also picked up a few diamonds as well along the way, another form of in-game currency found at special generators. These can be used to upgrade your team's equipment and the island they spawn at, and after collecting 5 of them, I purchased an upgrade called Heal Pool, which granted the regeneration effect for everyone on my team when they were at base. Shortly afterwards, I brought the set of potions I had bought to the central island, where I needed to make a decision. Should I try and use them to destroy Blue's bed again, or should I go for Green's bed instead? After some careful thinking, I decided to try my hand at breaking Green's bed, since my previous attempt to break Blue's bed had been unsuccessful. This was easier said than done, however, as Green Team had brought an Iron Golem to defend their bed, who, if you don't know, can see players even when they're invisible. This meant there was a serious risk to my security, so once I arrived on site at their base undetected, I made killing the Iron Golem my topmost priority. I had to be careful when doing this, as if I took any damage my invisibility would be removed, and my cover would be blown. But after a few carefully timed hits, the Iron Golem eventually fell. Unfortunately, immediately after I killed the Golem, I apparently set off an alarm trap at Green's base that removed my invisibility, meaning Green now knew I was on their island. Because of this, one Green player who hadn't seen me while I was invisible started attacking me before I could destroy the bed, and we engaged in a duel for the future of their bed. It was difficult to fight back against them, since they had slightly stronger equipment than I did, plus regeneration from their island's heal pool. But thanks to a successful combo I was able to pull off at the start of the duel, I managed to kill them before they killed me. I then went back to breaking the bed, and after tearing through a couple blocks of their defense, I was able to expose it and destroy it. So in the end, although it was a difficult mission with multiple hurdles that I needed to overcome, I was eventually able to successfully destroy their bed like I had hoped. And although I unfortunately didn't stick around for long afterwards as it was killed quickly after breaking it, the damage I wanted to enact had already been done. Now all of Green Team could no longer respawn, meaning they were extremely vulnerable going forward, putting our team at an advantage in the game. This meant that as long as nothing went wrong, we actually had a good chance of winning this match after all. Assuming nothing went wrong, that is. Which unfortunately I can't say is exactly what happened, because as soon as I respawned back on my team's island, suddenly our bed was also destroyed by none other than the last remaining yellow player, which completely eradicated our newly acquired advantage. Now, just like Green Team, we were also very vulnerable to elimination, which massively decreased our chances of winning. As a result, once the dust settled after our bed was destroyed, me and the rest of my team all subconsciously decided to work together more closely as a group, rather than separately with our own individual goals. This would help us in the long term going forward, because we would be able to defend ourselves better against anyone who came to attack us, making us less likely to die. Unfortunately, this didn't stop one of our teammates dying pretty soon after the bed was destroyed, as they were fireballed off a bridge they were standing on by an enemy player. However, the rest of us were able to stay alive in a group together for a while afterwards, up until one trip to the Central Island, when one of my teammates indicated that they wanted to try and attack Blue's base again. This was a risky move, as there was a high chance that we could get killed. However, it also didn't seem like there was any other ways we could win, so we went along with it. Thankfully, one of my team members had potions on them, so there was a high chance of us being able to break Blue's bed if they could sneak in undetected. All we had to do was cause a distraction, and I decided the best way to do this would be by luring any Blue players away from their bed defense by acting as a decoy. After all, if they were too busy trying to kill a visible intruder, then they may not notice an invisible intruder sneaking in and destroying their bed. And so, with the intention of distracting as many Blue players as possible, I charged into Blue's base, killed one of the players guarding the bed defense, and led the rest of them up to the top of our island away from my invisible teammate, who started to break into the Blue bed defense. This distraction turned out to be a success, as nobody on Blue team noticed my teammate, giving them ample time to destroy the bed. Unfortunately, in the process of distracting all the Blue players, I had taken quite a beating, and I had to escape once I was finished to avoid being permanently killed. Once I was away from the Blue Island, I looked back and hoped that my teammates would be successful, and that I had done enough to prevent any Blue players from stopping them, before heading back to our team's island. Along the way home, I grabbed some emeralds so I could buy diamond armor, just in case I needed the extra protection in an emergency. However, in the end, I wouldn't get the chance to make the purchase, as when I arrived at my team's island, I encountered the very yellow player who had destroyed our bed camping there, waiting for one of us to show up so they could kill us. When they saw me, they immediately launched several fireballs at the bridge I was standing on, attempting to knock me off. Once I realized what was happening, I tried to run away, but eventually one fireball hit the exact spot I was standing on and knocked me into the void, where I fell to my inescapable death and my permanent elimination from the game. It's unfortunate that it had to end like this, despite all that had happened in this game. But honestly, I'm just surprised I was able to get this far on my first attempt. Our team legitimately came close to winning several times, and although it's a shame I didn't win in the end, I'm happy with my performance overall. I just hope that I can carry over this momentum into any future games I play. Which, speaking of which, now that this first game is over, let's move on to my second game and see if that turned out any better. It did not turn out any better. Gonna be honest, compared to how things went in the first game, Game 2 was a pretty abysmal performance, all things considered. It was a significantly shorter game at the very least, and I don't think I did anything particularly standout in it, unlike in the previous match where I was able to at least break some beds and kill a lot of players. Though, with all that being said, while the game as a whole might not have gone very well, it didn't start that bad, I suppose. This time around, I wanted to go for a different playstyle than I had in Game 1, since I thought that maybe switching up how I played might bring in better results. So instead of playing offensive like I did before, I played defensive this game and focused on being the guy who built the bed defense. This involved me placing multiple layers of different materials ranging from end stone to wood and even wall around our team's bed, which I got to work doing as soon as I had enough currency to buy such materials. It wasn't long before people began trying to attack us, but thankfully we were able to deal with them initially without much trouble. Meanwhile, red became the first bed to be destroyed in this match while I was still building our team's bed defense, and most of the players on the team were quickly eliminated afterwards. I'm sure this was unfortunate for them, but honestly, I didn't have the time to feel sorry for them in that moment because things were also getting out of hand back on our island. After failing to successfully destroy our bed multiple times, the entirety of Yellow Team collectively decided to storm our island all at once, which was a nightmare to deal with. Eventually, we were able to kill 3 out of the 4 invading players, but the one surviving player was able to trap themselves inside the bed defense, where we couldn't get to them. We tried to break them out before we could break into the bed, but there was nothing we could do. They were too quick. Even though I had spent all of the match up until now building the bed defense, they were still able to cut through it in a matter of seconds and destroy the bed, rendering our team completely vulnerable less than 5 minutes into the game. Once they had broken it, they emerged from their hiding spot where we were able to finish them off. But we knew them and the rest of their team would be back soon to slaughter us. So in preparation, me and my other teammates upgraded our gear and waited on the island for the inevitable attacks to occur. Sure enough, yellow players soon started coming to our island trying to kill us, and although we were able to hold our own for a while, eventually, one by one, we were all killed by a yellow player in one way or another, including me. This brought an end to Game 2, which was honestly a pretty poor performance and match in my opinion. And unfortunately, Game 3 wasn't much better, as it was another short game that I think I performed even worse in, mostly due to me acting very impatient throughout most of it, as I'll discuss soon. It started in much the same way, with me being the one to build the bed defense, which I completed with no issues whatsoever. Then, I shifted my attention to the emeralds on the central island, as I wanted to use them once again to buy potions, like I had in the first game. I started to bridge to the central island as soon as I had enough wool. However, before I was able to reach it, I was jumped by 2 red players trying to get to our island. I was so startled and caught off guard by this that I actually walked off of my bridge like an idiot. However, before I died, I was able to punch one of the red players off of the bridge as well. Once I respawned, I killed the other player who had jumped me, and then continued to the central island where I grabbed enough emeralds to buy the potions I wanted, which I then attempted to use to attack Green's base. However, to cut a long story short, this failed miserably and blew up in my face, as I chose a very inopportune time to attack them, and I was quickly spotted and killed by a green player as soon as I stepped foot on their island. Now normally, in response to failure like this, one would reevaluate how they are approaching a problem, and try and come up with a new, more efficient plan to tackle their issue before taking all the time necessary to fully prepare for it. But unfortunately for me, in that moment I was feeling very impatient and didn't want to spend more time than I already had preparing for another attack. So when I respawned, instead of doing something sensible, I bought a single fire charge and then immediately tried storming Green's base again. As you can imagine, this was a big mistake, and the attack went even worse than the last one. This type of behavior is one of the big reasons I think my performance in this game was so mediocre compared to what came before and afterwards. As a whole, I acted very irrational and impatient, which resulted in me making very little progress in my attempts to speed up the flow of the game due to multiple mistakes. I'm not sure what exactly was making me act this way, even now months later, but one thing's for sure. It definitely hindered my chances of winning tremendously, and spelt doom for the rest of Game 3. Now thankfully, after this particular event happened, I was able to somewhat come to my senses and realize what I was doing was impractical. So after I helped stop an attempted blue invasion, I went back to trying to destroy their bed with potions. However, unfortunately, while I was collecting the emeralds to buy them, blue team actually got to green's bed first, meaning my efforts were rendered pointless as there was no bed to use the potions on. Then, just as things seemed like they couldn't get any worse, Blue came after us and stormed our island, and although we tried to show some resistance, we were very quickly outmatched and dispatched. This left us with no way to stop them from destroying our bed, and upon respawning, we too as a team were also all massacred at our base, putting an end to Game 3. Looking back, I probably should have been a bit more upset at this loss than I actually was, but I was more glad than anything that this game was over. As I mentioned, it went rather poorly, and at this point, I just wanted to move on to Game 4 so I could try again and maybe seek some sort of redemption. Game 4 started off with me once again switching up my strategy slightly, like I had in Game 2 and for much of the same reasons. After mediocre results as a bed defender in 2 consecutive games, I thought that perhaps switching up my playstyle might alter the results of the matches. In hindsight, did this change anything? No, not really. This time around, I decided I wanted to focus on collecting diamonds, since those could be used to buy team upgrades such as enchantments, traps, and regeneration, all of which will be beneficial for us. However, just after me and a teammate bridged to the Diamond Island to start gathering some, not only was Blue's bed destroyed, but Yellow also began slowly bridging towards our base to invade us. When we realized what was going on, me and the other teammate who had come with me hurried back to our island, and soon a brawl broke out between our team and Yellow team. We tried our best to prevent them from breaking our bed, but our efforts were not enough, and our bed was eventually destroyed in the conflict. Though, ironically enough, while Yellow was busy destroying our bed, their bed also got obliterated as well in the background. I guess karma really is a bitch. Thankfully, I was able to barely survive the attacks, and once all the invading players were gone, I used what little diamonds I had to buy heal pool. This came in handy shortly afterwards when Red began relentlessly trying to attack us, probably because we were the only team left alive that they needed to kill. Using the heal pool and a couple Dream Defenders, we were able for the most part to fight back against these attacks. However, after repeated assaults, our team was eventually reduced down to just one player, that of course being me. When this happened, I anticipated Red Team to launch one final attack to finish me off, so I climbed onto the roof of our base to prepare for their arrival. When they eventually came, with nowhere else to run, I attempted to fight back against them sword in hand, alongside a Dream Defender I had brought up to the top of the base with me. I was able to kill the first Red player without too much difficulty, and then when 2 other players came charging at me at once, I did sufficient damage to one and knocked the other off the platform we were on, presumably to their death. I then tried to quickly finish off the remaining player, however they were able to get the upper hand by swiftly stabbing me in the back, killing me instantly and ending the game. Overall, I don't think this game went as poorly as Game 3 did, but it certainly wasn't my finest hour, which is a sentiment I can carry over to Game 5 as well. This was also not my finest hour by any means, however, it could have been worse I suppose. At the very least, it did give me the opportunity to give my diamond strategy another shot, after I didn't really get to use it that much in the previous game. Whether that was a good or a bad thing, I'll let you decide. When the game started, I bridged to the Diamond Island as soon as I had the blocks to do so, in order to start gathering the diamonds I needed. However, when I arrived, I discovered that I was not the only one who wanted to do that, as a green player was also slowly creeping towards the Diamond Island as well. Now, as we've established at this point, my skill in combat isn't exactly superb, so the smart decision in this scenario would be to grab all the diamonds that had already generated and run back to my base with them, avoiding a jeopardizing fight that I would likely lose and securing all the diamonds I wanted. Unfortunately, as we've also already established, I usually don't make the sensible decisions in these scenarios. So of course, when this happened, I decided to try and fight this person instead of just backing off. And would you believe, I ended up dying. Shocker, I know. Thankfully, once I respawned, I was actually able to make 2 successful trips to the Diamond Island without getting killed, where I was able to grab a couple of diamonds and even pick up a few kills as well, all while Yellow's bed became the first to be destroyed in this match. Then, on my 4th trip to the Diamond Generator, I came across another green player posing a threat to us, who initially was able to kill me when I tried to stop them. However, after respawning, I was able to get revenge and finish him off by knocking him off the bridge he was standing on. Rather easily, I might add. No joke, when this happened, I wasn't even trying to knock them off necessarily. I think at the time I was just trying to kill them normally, but when I hit them, it was somehow enough to send them over the edge unexpectedly. Though I'm certainly not complaining about it. Afterwards, I continued to collect even more diamonds, and at one point got really close to buying Protection 1 for my team's armor, which would have been a super useful upgrade. However, when I went to get the final diamond I needed for the purchase, disaster struck, as a red player was able to sneak into our base while I wasn't looking and claw their way into the bed defense, tearing the bed apart. This threw a massive wrench in my plan of survival, and ultimately was the thing that cost us this game. Although I did eventually buy that Protection 1 upgrade, it didn't seem to do much for us in the long term, as soon the members of our team began dropping like flies one by one at the hands of enemy players, until I was the last player left standing. Even though all hope seemed lost, I did attempt to salvage this situation by attempting to collect even more diamonds for upgrades, but even that turned out to be detrimental, as while I was sitting in the generator, a red player was able to sneak up behind me and combo me off the edge of the map, killing me. And with that, yet another game came to a disappointing end. Again. I know what you're probably all thinking at this point. Wow, 4 mediocre performances in a row. At that point, why even bother trying anymore? You're clearly not capable of replicating the mild success you had in the first game, let alone capable of actually getting a win. And you know what? You're not unjustified for thinking that. Hell, even I was starting to think that my endeavors were becoming a bit pointless while this was happening. But then, after this series of unfortunate and disheartening failures, I was given a small glimmer of hope, but I still might have a chance of pulling through, when I played Game 6. Up until then, Game 1 had been far and away my best performance by a mile, with none of the other games even coming close. That was until Game 6, which was easily my best performance since Game 1, though it still wasn't without its shortcomings. To kick things off, I spent around 3 minutes constructing a multi-layered bed defense, like I had in Games 2 and 3. Since nobody else seemingly was up to the task of doing so, and because after Games 4 and 5 I no longer wanted to utilize the diamond strategy I'd come up with. It had proven itself not very successful, and I would rather try again at being a bed defender than I would being a diamond collector. While I was doing this, Red's bed became the first one to be destroyed, and I also helped stop many invasions from enemy players. Once I'd finished the bed defense, I even tried carrying out one myself with a teammate at Green's base. It did not go very well. As soon as we arrived, we were instantly bombarded by all the Green players at once, and to make matters worse, this assault aggravated one of them and made them come over to our base to try and break our bed in response. And in fairness to them, they got decently close. They were able to trap themselves inside the bed defense with no issues whatsoever, but unfortunately for them, they were stopped by me and another teammate when we uncovered and promptly pounced upon them. We were both able to swiftly dispatch them, saving the bed from potential destruction. However, then we encountered a problem. When we had uncovered the Green player, we had found them in a 2x1 hole they had made, which we had both jumped into to try and kill them. Now that they were dead, me and my teammate were left stuck in this hole because neither of us could break blocks to get out since we were always in each other's way. This was not ideal by any means, and we both made attempts to contact our other teammates to make them come and help us, but nothing seemed to be working. Eventually, the other player intentionally disconnected so that they could respawn at the generator, which allowed me to break myself out of the hole I was trapped in. Once freed, I helped kill 3 more players trying to invade our island, one of which being the final red player still alive, and also bought Protection 1 armor for everyone again using some diamonds I'd acquired from killing other players. Then, out of the blue, Green's bed was destroyed by some yellow players, making all the Green players, who up to that point had been nothing but a nuisance to us, vulnerable to elimination. When this happened, I decided that I wanted to get revenge against said Green players for their actions, so I went to their base as soon as I had the opportunity to hunt them down and kill them. When I arrived, 2 of the 3 Green players left had fled to the central island, and only 1 remained at their base. However, this player wouldn't remain there for much longer, as upon sight, I approached and slaughtered them very quickly. I then gave chase to the final 2 players and was able to catch one of them before coming into conflict with Yellow Team, who were also trying to catch both players. At this point, my health was pretty low, and I wouldn't have been able to fight back against the Yellow players even if I wanted to. So when a Yellow player started attacking me, I decided to just cut my losses and gave up, before jumping into the void so I could get back to the team island. I'd already completed my objective of killing a few Green players, so there was hardly any reason to stick around and waste time. Upon respawning, I witnessed from a distance the death of the final remaining Green player, and then noticed a solitary Yellow player sneaking into the deserted Red Island next to us. Assuming that they were planning on attacking our island, I went to kill them before they could do any harm. Then, while I was crossing the bridge connecting the two islands, by coincidence, Yellow's bed was actually destroyed by one of my teammates, meaning I now had more reason than ever to try and kill this yellow player. When I finally arrived at the red island where the yellow player was hiding, I jumped down and engaged in combat with them. Both of us had roughly the same gear, meaning we were both equally matched and equally likely to win in this duel. However, I was at a slight disadvantage, since I had taken some fall damage when arriving at the scene and from some fireballs the yellow player threw at me. So in the end, although the outcome was very close, the yellow player barely managed to get the upper hand and win. This was disappointing, especially since it would have been a final kill if I had won. But there was no use crying over spilt tea, so I just had to accept this defeat and move on. Besides, there were still many more opportunities for me to kill yellow players in the near future, so it wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, one of those opportunities was about to present itself to me very soon, only a little while after I'd respawned. I was on the central island at the time, trying to collect some emeralds, when I saw two of my teammates venturing into Yellow's territory, presumably to try and pick up some Yellow final kills. Since I was having no luck with the emeralds, and because I didn't want to miss this opportunity, I decided to join them, as I thought we may have a better chance of succeeding as a larger group. And so, we all headed to their base, where we found 3 of the 4 yellow players hiding behind a wall of glass they'd constructed. They were all cooped up in their generator, hoarding their riches and basking in the regeneration from the heal pool they had bought. This heal pool meant that once again, although we had an equal number of players as them, we were at a slight disadvantage since they had the benefit of health regeneration. However, this wasn't going to stop us from launching our planned attack, so when the time came when we were all ready to go, we leapt into action and began dueling with the yellow players inside their base. It was a violent struggle, but amidst it all, I was able to pin one yellow player against the wall of their base and kill them with a well-timed combo. I then tried to fight the other 2 players as well. However, I wasn't a match for them, and so I died shortly thereafter alongside my other teammates. So in the end, although we weren't able to kill as many people as we would have liked, we were at least able to take out one of the yellow players permanently, which I for one was satisfied with. It was a small but valuable contribution to a seemingly guaranteed victory at this point, so I felt perfectly content with it. Now we only had 3 more players left to kill before we would win, which was the closest I'd come to victory up until now, which was exciting. As such, as soon as I respawned, I began preparing to buy powerful equipment I could use to hunt down the rest of the yellow team, since it felt like the win I'd been wanting was soon about to be in my grasp, and I couldn't have been happier about it. And then this happened. In the span of just a few short seconds, our entire advantage and chance of victory had been completely eviscerated. And to make matters worse, the yellow player who had used invisibility to destroy our bed soon turned their attention towards me and started attacking me relentlessly. I tried to fight back, but they were able to hit me repeatedly so quickly that I had to flee from the fight. However, before I was able to escape, they were able to knock me off a high platform I was standing on at low health, causing me to die of full damage and be eliminated from a game I was so close to finally winning. Then, slowly, my other teammates also started to be picked off one by one as well, until there was only 1 player left alive on our team. They were our last hope, our last chance at success, our last saving grace, and they just walked off the map. Brilliant! So after all of that, after we had almost pulled through, our team still eventually lost. I'll admit, like always, this loss was mildly disheartening for me. But after 4 games in a row of mediocre performances, this loss didn't feel as bad by comparison. I actually felt relatively good with how I performed, considering we did legitimately come close to winning, proving that my goal was still achievable despite everything. This motivated me to keep trying, because no matter how good or bad the next few games could be if I decided to keep playing, I knew that there could still be a chance of success even if everything seemed lost. And so, with all of that in mind, I went into Game 7 with a little bit of optimism. If I had to describe this game in one word, it would be slow, and that was especially true for the start of it. While I once again took up the position of defending the bed for the 4th time now, we had barely any players try and invade our island. A first, to be sure. It also took around 4 minutes for anyone's bed to be destroyed, which felt longer than it usually takes for me, although I don't actually know if this is a long time in most Bedwars games. Eventually, I was able to complete the bed defense with very little issue, only having 2 groups of people in total try and do any damage to it, which would be a miracle in most games. Afterwards, I bridged to the central island and began to collect emeralds so I could buy obsidian to protect the bed even more, and it took me about 10 minutes to do this. And in that time, I kid you not, literally nothing happened. No beds were destroyed, nobody was eliminated. Overall, it was just a very dull stretch of the game. Thankfully, after I had bought the obsidian I needed and placed it securely around the bed, the pace of the game did pick up a bit, for better or for worse. More people began trying to attack our bed, which is something I don't think I've ever considered as a positive when playing Bedwars, but at the very least these minor conflicts were able to distract me for a bit from the boredom I was feeling. And even then, the invasions were still so pitiful and easy to deal with that I still felt bored throughout them all. Between these attacks, I continued to collect emeralds from the central island, saving up enough to buy some potions to break Blue's bed with. I then proceeded to fail miserably before I even got to Blue's base as soon as I tried to use them. Fortunately, soon afterwards, I was able to buy another set of potions, and was given the opportunity to try and break their bed again. Once again, it failed miserably, though I did get a bit closer than last time, plus I was actually able to make it out of there alive. Following on from this, I didn't try and destroy Blue's or any other team's bed again, and that was because the game had gone on for so long, but soon, all beds were going to be destroyed anyway to prevent the game from lasting forever. That is not a joke. I had been playing this match for 28 minutes straight, and in that time, only one team had had their bed broken. That should tell you all you need to know about the pacing of this game. Anyways, to prepare for this mass bed destruction, I upgraded my island's generator using some diamonds so that it would produce more iron and gold, as well as emeralds, meaning I wouldn't have to risk going to the dangerous central island if I needed to get some. Then, after all the beds were destroyed, I decided to stay in said upgraded generator and wait until I had enough emeralds to buy diamond armor. This took quite a while, and during that time, one of my teammates was killed away from our island, and a yellow player even tried to come and attack us, but we were easily able to dispatch them. Eventually, I was able to buy my diamond armor after a long period of waiting, and afterwards, I shifted my focus onto making our team island as safe as possible. I did this by removing the bed defense to create more space, and by placing buckets of water on the edges of the island to catch ourselves in case we were to fall off. This was all in preparation for the rapidly approaching sudden death, the final stretch of a Bedwars game where multiple dragons spawn and attempt to knock players off the map, all to decrease the remaining player numbers and narrow them down until a winner is decided. If I were able to survive sudden death, it would technically count as a win, so I wanted to make sure I had the highest chance of success as possible. When sudden death eventually began, I stayed on our team's island and tried to shoot any dragons that attacked me with a bow I had bought. However, I soon discovered that the dragons weren't the only thing trying to kill me, as not that long after sudden death started, a yellow player enderpearled onto the island and started attacking me. They were able to get some good hits on me with their diamond sword, but thanks to the heal pool that was active on my island and a combo I was able to pull off that pushed them back, they were the one who ended up being killed. Once they were dead, I continued to fend off any dragons that approached me, and as time went on, it seemed as though I would have a good chance of surviving the onslaught. But then, I made the worst mistake I have ever made in any of these Bedwars games. After surviving for around 3 minutes, out of a corner of my eye, I noticed that my only other remaining teammate was on the central island and was being harassed by both remaining yellow players. This concerned me, as it was a potential threat to their safety, and I didn't want them to die since it would decrease our team's chances of winning. As a result, I decided I needed to go and help them, which required getting to the central island as fast as possible. Fortunately, earlier in the game, I had bought an ender pearl from the item shop, which if used correctly, could teleport me there faster than if I just walked. And so, with the intent of coming to my teammates' aid as soon as I could, I threw the ender pearl at the central island, hoping to land on one of the outer platforms surrounding it. Instead, I completely missed the shot by a mile and landed on the side of a wall suspended above the void. Then, before I had any time to react or realize what had happened, I fell into the deep empty abyss below me. This killed me, costing me a very nearly won game, all because of a stupid mistake. This frustrated me beyond belief. I was there. I was nearly there. I had 7 minutes left before my long-desired win, and I threw it all away. Despite this devastating loss though, I didn't quit out of frustration, like some of you might have expected me to. By this point, I was already too deep into this challenge, and it was too late to turn back now. So, even though I was extremely disappointed in myself, I still continued on into the next game nonetheless. This game would have been fairly standard and unremarkable, all things considered, if it had not been for one factor. One thing that set this apart from every other Bedwars game I talk about today, and that was Blue Team. For some reason, throughout the majority of this game, no matter how many times they failed, Blue would just not leave us alone. In the first 10 minutes alone, they tried to attack us around 14 times in total. And what's even worse was that none of their attempts were even close to being successful. They were literally just throwing everything they had at the wall, desperately trying to have something stick, and it got very annoying very quickly. Aside from them, the rest of this game went relatively smoothly for the most part during its early stages. I was once again defending the bed, this time assisted by one of my teammates who was kind enough to get obsidian for me, and as per usual, a few beds were destroyed very quickly into the match. By the 10-minute mark, only our and Blue Team's bed remained intact, which of course encouraged Blue to try and attack us even more than they already had been. This time, however, they actually thought about what they were doing, instead of just charging in headfirst with no plan of action. One Blue player even dared to use their brain and came up with a strategy to destroy our bed. And I'll be fair to them, it was a pretty solid one at that. By using a pop-up tower, they were able to barricade themselves into our bed defense, allowing them ample time to mine away at the various layers of blocks I'd constructed. Unfortunately for them though, while they tried their best, they weren't able to break our bed in the end, since I was able to stop them pretty quickly. Is what I would be saying if it wasn't for their damn pop-up tower spawning literally on top of me, trapping and slowly suffocating me inside a wall of wool. This prevented me from doing anything to stop them, and by the time I was able to escape this trap by dying and respawning, Blue had broken through our bed defense and dismantled our bed. Thankfully, we were able to kill the player afterwards, but now that Blue Team had finally succeeded, we were on thin ice. However, as long as we were careful, we still had a chance of winning this game despite everything. At least, we did, before I basically killed myself again when I tried to attack a Blue player using a fireball up close. Whoops! Overall, compared to the last two games I'd played, Game 8 was a bit of a letdown. It was significantly shorter than they were, though at the same time, nothing really atrocious happened in it, aside from the way I died obviously. However, little did I know, this game was only the calm before the storm that was Game 9. From the moment this game began, something felt different. For starters, for the first time since Game 5, I was not the person defending the bed, which I for one was very thankful for. This gave me the opportunity to go back to an offensive playstyle, and so, as soon as I had saved up enough currency to buy all the equipment I wanted, I began heading to the central island to collect emeralds, like I had in the earlier games. By this time, Red's bed had already been destroyed, and Green's bed was soon to follow suit, meaning the only team we had any competition with in this game was Blue Team, which was really lucky. Once I arrived at the central island, I snagged 2 emeralds and then headed back to my base to store them in my ender chest. Along the way, I encountered a Blue player trying to invade our base using invisibility potions, and soon a fight broke out between the two of us, of which I was the victor. I then discovered once they had died and I had secured my emeralds in my ender chest, that this Blue player was the only person on their team left, as all their other teammates had deliberately left the game shortly after it started. With this in mind, even though I didn't have any of the special equipment I normally used yet, I decided that I wanted to attempt to break their bed, since if there was only one person defending it, it would be theoretically easy to do so. And as it turns out, it was! Very easy in fact. All I had to do was follow Blue back to their base unbeknownst to them, and mine through a couple layers of wood and wool while they weren't looking. And bang, the bed was gone. This put our team in a very good position, as it left us as the only team with the bed still intact, and with only 4 players left to kill before victory. Of course, one of those players was the Blue player whose bed I had just destroyed, who I attempted to kill using a fireball immediately after doing so. However, like last time, this didn't end very well for me. Thankfully, they died shortly afterwards anyway, alongside another player from Green Team, reducing the enemy player count down to 2 players. All that was left to do now was kill them, and I would finally be able to claim the win that I desired for so long, which I was very eager to do. So eager, in fact, but I decided to use the emeralds I had collected earlier to buy an invisibility potion, so that I could sneak up on and kill one of them at their base, which I promptly attempted to do as soon as I could after making the purchase. Unfortunately, this attack didn't go quite as I had hoped, with the green player being able to fend me off and knock me into the void after I initiated the encounter, which was disappointing. However, thankfully it wasn't a total waste of time, as it provided a distraction which allowed my teammate to launch a fireball at the green player, which knocked them into the void and killed them, leaving the other green player as the only obstacle left for us to overcome. After I respawned, I rushed back to the area where I had died, and presumably where the last green player was located, eager to finally finish and win my first game of Bedwars in around a year. When I finally arrived, I was too late to contribute much to the death of the green player. However, I was able to witness it. They had been cornered by one of my teammates on the diamond island next to their base, and were desperately trying to avoid being knocked into the void. But in the end, their efforts weren't enough, and they eventually fell to their death, resulting in our team being labelled as the victors of the match, and me finally winning a game of Bedwars after 9 attempts. So yeah, that was how I won, and although it certainly took a lot longer to achieve than it probably should have, I can undoubtedly say that I had a blast playing through all these games for this video. Mostly. This experience has reminded me why I love the game of Bedwars so much, even despite its decline in popularity. Its gameplay has resonated with me and millions of others over the years, and it's still just as good as it was back when it released in 2017, which is an amazing accomplishment. If I'm being honest, even though I enjoy a lot of the new, more modern Minecraft minigames we have in 2024, I'd still probably call this my favourite out of all the ones I've played, and I think it's a real shame it doesn't get as much attention as it used to. If there's one thing you should take away from this video, aside from whether you like this type of content and want to see more of it, in which case you should subscribe, it's that you should definitely give Bedwars a revisit in the near future. You never know, you might also get something out of it that you didn't expect, just like I did. Bedwars will always have a special place in my heart, and it's just as good as I remember it being even 7 years later.